Part 1. When Storms Reveal Truth. The October storm hit Gull Point with the kind of fury that reminded Emma why lighthouses had been built on this rocky Maine coast for over a century. She stood in her research station, watching through salt-stained windows as waves crashed against the granite cliffs below, sending spray high enough to mist the lighthouse beacon 90 feet above. Her radio crackled with Coast Guard updates about small craft advisories, but Emma's attention focused on the tide pools she'd been monitoring for 2 years. Tomorrow's survey would reveal how the marine ecosystem had weathered another autumn tempest, data that formed the backbone of her ecosystem preservation research for the National Park Service. A knock at her door surprised her. Few people visited Gull Point during storm season, and fewer still made the treacherous drive down the peninsula road when weather turned dangerous. She opened the door to find a man about her age, dark hair whipping in the wind, expensive camera equipment secured in weatherproof cases. His wire-rimmed glasses were spotted with rain, but his brown eyes held the patient intensity she'd learned to associate with serious photographers. "Dr. Hartwell, I'm David Chen. I called last week about photographing the lighthouse for a documentation project." He raised his voice over the wind. "I know the timing isn't ideal, but stormlight can be extraordinary for lighthouse photography." Emma remembered the call. A travel photographer working on a book about America's remaining operational lighthouses. She'd agreed to provide facility access, though she'd expected him to postpone given the weather forecast. "You drove down here in this storm?" she asked, stepping back to let him into the research station's small entry area. "I've photographed in worse conditions. Storm systems create dramatic lighting that you can't replicate in calm weather." David secured his equipment near the door, his movements economical and practiced. "I appreciate you allowing access during active weather." Emma studied his face, noting the quiet confidence that suggested genuine professional experience rather than reckless thrill-seeking. "The lighthouse beacon operates automatically, but I can show you the exterior access points and discuss safety considerations for the cliff areas." "That would be helpful. I'm particularly interested in capturing the beacon during actual storm conditions, when it's serving its essential function rather than just looking picturesque." Something in his tone suggested deeper understanding of the lighthouse's purpose than she'd expected from most photographers. "How long have you been documenting lighthouses?" 18 months. This book project focuses on structures that still serve their original navigation purpose." David paused, his expression growing more serious. "My climbing partner and I planned this project together before he died in an avalanche. I'm completing it as a tribute to his love of historical preservation." The admission carried quiet grief that Emma recognized immediately. She'd heard that same carefully controlled pain in her own voice when discussing her late husband's oceanographic research. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, meaning it. "The lighthouse has been operational since 1847. It still guides fishing vessels and recreational boats through the reef system." "And you maintain both the beacon and conduct marine research?" "The lighthouse operates automatically now, but it requires monitoring and maintenance. My primary work involves ecosystem preservation, tracking species populations, water quality, environmental changes." Emma gestured toward her computer setup, where data from underwater sensors displayed real-time readings. "The two responsibilities complement each other since both involve protecting maritime interests." David nodded, his photographer's eye taking in the research equipment without asking intrusive questions about her scientific work. "Would it be possible to photograph the lighthouse exterior during the storm? I understand if access is too dangerous." Emma considered the request. The lighthouse grounds were treacherous during storms, but she'd navigated them safely for 2 years. Allowing a visitor proper access was part of her facility management responsibilities. "I can show you safe routes to several vantage points. The storm should peak within the next few hours, then begin moving offshore." She pulled on her weather gear. "Stay close and follow my exact path. The cliff edges are unstable and visibility changes quickly." For the next 2 hours, Emma guided David around the lighthouse grounds, pointing out secure positions for photography while ensuring his safety on the storm-lashed terrain. She found herself impressed by his patience, waiting for optimal light conditions, carefully protecting his equipment, never rushing shots or taking unnecessary risks. The beacon rotation creates different lighting effects depending on atmospheric conditions, she explained during a brief shelter break. Tonight's storm provides unusual clarity between rain bands. I can see that. The light cuts through the storm in ways I haven't captured at other locations. David checked his camera settings, his movements confident despite the challenging conditions. This lighthouse has exceptional positioning for its protective function. The location was chosen specifically for maximum visibility from multiple approach angles. Ships can see the beacon from 12 miles in clear conditions. As the storm began to weaken, David completed his photography session with quiet professionalism. Emma found herself curious about his other lighthouse documentation, though she kept questions focused on facility management rather than his artistic process. Thank you for the access and guidance, David said as they returned to the research station. The storm photography exceeded my expectations. Will you be documenting other seasonal conditions? Emma asked, surprising herself with the question. I typically return to each lighthouse multiple times to capture different atmospheric conditions and seasonal variations. If that would be acceptable, I'd like to photograph Gull Point during winter and spring storms as well. Emma nodded, recognizing the request as reasonable for thorough documentation. Contact me before traveling. Weather conditions here change rapidly, and some seasons are safer for exterior photography than others. David smiled, the expression transforming his serious features. I'll plan accordingly. Thank you again, Dr. Hartwell. After he left, Emma found herself thinking about his quiet competence during the storm, his respectful approach to her workspace, and the carefully controlled grief she'd recognized in his voice. For the first time in months, she looked forward to a visitor's return. Part 2. Winter's Stark Beauty. February brought the kind of stark beauty to Gull Point that made Emma understand why artists traveled hundreds of miles to capture Maine's winter coast. Ice formations clung to the granite cliffs like crystal sculptures, while the lighthouse beacon cut through snow squalls with dramatic precision. She was analyzing water temperature data from her monitoring sensors when David's rental car appeared on the access road, arriving exactly when he'd said he would during their brief phone conversation the week before. Emma found herself anticipating his visit more than she'd expected, though she told herself it was simply appreciation for having competent company during the isolated winter months. Dr. Hartwell, David called, emerging from his car with the same careful equipment handling she remembered from October. Thank you for allowing winter access. The ice formations look extraordinary. The storm systems create different crystalline structures depending on wind direction and temperature variations, Emma replied, pulling on her insulated jacket. I can show you safe approaches to the best vantage points, though winter conditions require more caution than autumn storms. David nodded, shouldering his camera gear. I researched winter photography challenges for coastal Maine. Ice makes footing treacherous, and equipment needs protection from temperature extremes. For the next 3 days, Emma provided facility access while David pursued his independent photography work. She found herself timing her outdoor research activities to coincide with his sessions, ostensibly for safety monitoring, but truthfully because she enjoyed observing his patient approach to capturing optimal conditions. Coffee? She offered on his second evening, finding him reviewing photographs on his laptop in the lighthouse's small visitor area. That sounds perfect, David replied, looking up from his screen. Winter photography is technically demanding, but the light quality is remarkable. Emma prepared coffee in her research station's small kitchen, surprised by how natural it felt to share her space with someone who understood the value of solitary, focused work. Your documentation project must require extensive travel, she said, settling across from him with 2 steaming mugs. Constant movement for the past 18 months. Different lighthouse locations, different seasons, different weather conditions. David accepted the coffee gratefully. It seemed necessary after Alex died, Staying in one place felt impossible. Grief affects everyone differently. I chose isolation and routine work after losing my husband. Emma found herself sharing more than she'd intended. Mike was an oceanographer, research diving accident 2 years ago. David's expression grew compassionate. I'm sorry. Losing someone who shared your professional world must make the work both meaningful and painful. It does, but maintaining ecosystem research feels like honoring what we both valued about marine science. Emma wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, appreciating its warmth. What draws you to Lighthouse documentation specifically? Alex loved historical preservation. We'd discussed this project for years, documenting structures that still serve their original purpose before automation eliminates the human element entirely. David's voice carried the same controlled grief she'd noticed during their first meeting. Completing the project feels like keeping a promise. Their conversation continued naturally, moving from professional motivations to personal reflections on loss, purpose, and the ways people found meaning after devastating change. Emma discovered that David's patient observation skills extended beyond photography to genuine listening, while David found himself drawn to Emma's thoughtful analysis of complex systems and relationships. Do you miss collaborative work? David asked during a comfortable pause. Sometimes. Mike and I challenged each other's assumptions, pushed for more innovative approaches. Emma considered the question honestly. But working alone has taught me self-reliance and deeper focus. What about your photography? Did you usually work independently? Mixed. Some projects required collaboration, others demanded solitude. This Lighthouse documentation feels necessary to complete alone, though I admit it can be isolating. Isolation has advantages, Emma said quietly. No compromises, no explaining your methods, no accommodating others' schedules or preferences. Also, no one to share discoveries with, no different perspectives on problems, no celebration of successes. Emma met his eyes, recognizing the loneliness behind his practical observation. No, there isn't. On David's final evening, snow began falling heavily, creating crystalline beauty around the lighthouse beam. Emma found herself reluctant to see him leave, though she attributed the feeling to enjoying intelligent conversation after months of solitude. The winter photography exceeded my expectations, David said, packing his equipment with the same methodical care she'd observed throughout his visit. Would spring documentation be acceptable? Storm patterns should be different but equally dramatic. Spring brings different weather systems and marine activity patterns, Emma agreed. Late April or early May would provide optimal conditions for exterior photography. I'll contact you about scheduling. Thank you for the facility access and... David paused, seeming to search for appropriate words. For the company, winter can be particularly isolating. It can be, Emma agreed softly. Safe travels, David. After his departure, Emma returned to her research with renewed focus, though she found herself thinking about their conversations and looking forward to spring's arrival with unexpected anticipation. Part 3. Spring's Renewal. May arrived at Gull Point with the kind of renewal that made Emma remember why she'd chosen coastal research over laboratory work. Migrating seabirds returned to their nesting sites, tide pool ecosystems awakened from winter dormancy, and warming water temperatures triggered increased marine activity that required careful documentation. David's spring visit coincided with optimal conditions for both her research and his photography, though their work remained entirely separate. Emma focused on tracking seasonal population changes while David pursued his lighthouse documentation during different weather and lighting conditions. The spring light is completely different from winter, David observed on his second morning, adjusting camera settings while Emma conducted her routine tide pool survey 30 yards away. Softer, but with more complex color variations. Spring weather patterns are less dramatic but more variable, Emma replied, making notes about anemone populations without looking up from her data collection. Storm systems move through quickly rather than settling for extended periods. Their conversations over shared meals had grown more personal with each visit. moving beyond polite facility management into genuine friendship. Emma found herself anticipating David's insights on topics ranging from travel experiences to philosophical questions about purpose and meaning. "Do you think about the future differently now?" David asked on his third evening as they sat in Emma's research station watching spring rain create patterns on the windows. "Differently how?" Emma set down her coffee, giving him her full attention. "Before loss, I planned years ahead. Photography projects, climbing expeditions with Alex, professional goals. Now I think in seasons, maybe months at most." Emma nodded, understanding the shift he described. "I used to plan research projects with 5-year timelines. Mike and I discussed career moves, family possibilities, retirement dreams. Now I focus on immediate work, data collection, current preservation needs." "Is that healthier or more limiting?" David asked. "Both, I think. It prevents overwhelming anxiety about uncertain futures, but it also prevents hope about positive possibilities," Emma said. David studied her profile in the soft lamplight. "What positive possibilities did you stop imagining?" The question touched something Emma rarely allowed herself to examine. "Partnership, I suppose. Shared discoveries, combined expertise, creating something larger than individual efforts." She paused, then added quietly, "Love that enhances rather than competes with meaningful work." "You think those possibilities ended permanently?" David asked. "I thought they had. Losing Mike felt like losing the only person who understood my commitment to marine research, who valued that dedication rather than seeing it as competition for attention." David leaned forward slightly. "But you don't think that anymore?" Emma met his eyes, feeling vulnerable but honest. "I'm beginning to wonder if I was wrong about that. These past months, talking with someone who understands dedication to preservation work, who doesn't see professional passion as personal rejection." She trailed off, uncertain how much to reveal. "Emma," David said softly, "I need to tell you something. These visits to Gull Point have become more important to me than Lighthouse documentation. I look forward to seeing you, to our conversations, to the way you think about complex problems." Emma felt her heart rate increase. "David, I'm not asking for anything to change. I know we're both still processing loss, still figuring out what we need. But I want you to know that visiting you has become the best part of my travel schedule." "It's the best part of my research schedule, too," Emma admitted. "I've been looking forward to your visits in ways that have nothing to do with facility management." They sat in comfortable silence, both recognizing that their friendship had evolved into something deeper and more complex, though neither felt ready to define it precisely. "What happens now?" David asked eventually. "I don't know. I'm still figuring out how to honor my life with Mike while remaining open to new connections." Emma's voice carried uncertainty, but not fear. "What about you? Are you ready to consider staying in one place longer than a photography project requires?" "I'm beginning to think constant movement was avoidance rather than healing. That maybe the peace I've found here comes from connection rather than beautiful scenery." "Maybe we figure it out gradually," Emma suggested. "No pressure, no timelines, no promises we're not ready to make." "I'd like that," David replied, his smile warm with possibility. As David prepared to leave the next morning, both understood that something fundamental had shifted between them, though the full implications remained to be explored. Part 4. Summer's Truth. August brought long days and gentle weather to Gull Point that created perfect conditions for David's lighthouse photography and Emma's expanded summer research schedule. Tourist season was ending, leaving the coast peaceful enough for extended outdoor work, though their professional activities remained completely separate. David arrived for what they both understood might be his final seasonal documentation visit, his lighthouse photography project nearing completion after 18 months of travel to locations across the country. This should complete the seasonal documentation for Gull Point, David explained while reviewing his photography goals for the week. "I have enough material for the book, assuming weather cooperates for a few final shots." Emma nodded, though the prospect of his project ending created unexpected anxiety. Summer storms are less frequent but can be spectacular when they develop. The atmospheric conditions create different lighting than spring or winter systems. That's what I'm hoping to capture, David said, setting up his equipment with the practiced efficiency she'd come to appreciate over their months of acquaintance. Their routine had evolved into comfortable domesticity, shared meals, evening conversations, morning coffee before beginning their separate work. Emma found herself treasuring these simple rituals while simultaneously fearing their inevitable end. "What happens after the Lighthouse project is complete?" she asked on his third evening, as they watched sunset paint the horizon in shades of rose and gold. "I'm not sure. The book will require editing, layout design, publisher coordination, but the travel photography phase is essentially finished." David's voice carried uncertainty she hadn't heard before. 18 months of constant movement, and I'm not sure what comes next. Does the prospect of staying in one place still feel impossible? David was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. Not impossible anymore. Different. These visits to Gull Point have been the most peaceful experiences I've had since Alex died. Emma felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, though she tried to maintain realistic expectations. Peace is valuable for healing. "Emma," David said, turning to face her directly, "I need to be honest about something. My feelings for you have evolved beyond friendship or appreciation for peaceful visits." Emma's breath caught, though part of her had been anticipating this conversation. "David, I'm falling in love with you. With your dedication to preservation work, your thoughtful approach to complex problems, the way you've created meaningful solitude without becoming bitter or closed off." His voice carried quiet intensity. "I'm falling in love with the person you are and the life you've built here." Emma felt tears prick her eyes as she processed his confession. "I'm falling in love with you too, with your patience, your understanding of loss, the way you see beauty in difficult conditions. But," David sensed hesitation in her voice, "but I'm terrified of dishonoring Mike's memory, of moving forward in ways that feel like abandonment of what we shared." Emma's voice trembled slightly. "And you're terrified of commitment after losing Alex, of caring deeply enough to be devastated again." "Yes," David admitted. "Both of those fears are real." They sat in silence, watching the lighthouse beam begin its evening rotation as darkness approached. The beacon's steady presence felt reassuring, a reminder that some things endured despite storm and change. "What if we're approaching this wrong?" Emma said eventually. "What if honoring the people we lost means living fully rather than preserving ourselves in grief?" "What do you mean?" "Mike valued my capacity for deep connection, for finding meaning in relationships as well as work. Refusing to love again doesn't honor that. It wastes what he most valued about me." Emma's voice grew stronger as she articulated thoughts she'd been developing for months. "And Alex valued your engagement with life, your willingness to take meaningful risks. Avoiding commitment doesn't honor his memory. It prevents you from living the kind of full life he would have wanted for you." David nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in her reasoning. "So the question becomes whether we're brave enough to risk loving each other despite knowing how much loss can hurt." "Are we?" Emma asked. "I want to be," David replied honestly. "Emma, I want to find out what happens when two people who understand loss choose to build something together despite the risks." "I want that too," Emma whispered. David reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "What would that look like practically? Your research is here. My work requires some travel. We figure it out as we go. Maybe you establish a home base while continuing selected photography projects. Maybe I occasionally join you for locations near marine research opportunities. Maybe we simply choose each other and trust that practical details can be solved by people committed to making it work." "Emma," David said, lifting their joined hands to brush a kiss across her knuckles, "will you let me love you? Will you risk building something new while honoring what we've both lost?" "Yes," Emma breathed, her smile radiant with possibility. "Yes to all of it." Their first kiss happened naturally, surrounded by the lighthouse's steady beam and the sound of gentle waves against granite cliffs, tasting of hope and courage, and the recognition that some risks were worth taking for the possibility of profound joy. Part 5. Full Circle. 1 year after their first meeting, David returned to Gull Point not as a traveling photographer documenting lighthouses, but as a man ready to build a permanent life with the woman he loved. His book project was complete, his nomadic period finished, and his heart finally open to the possibility of lasting happiness. Emma stood in her research station, watching his familiar rental car navigate the access road one final time. Tomorrow, a moving truck would arrive with his photography equipment and personal belongings, marking the end of seasonal visits and the beginning of shared daily life. "How does it feel to be finished with the lighthouse documentation?" Emma asked as David entered the research station that would soon become their shared home. "Satisfying and strange. 18 months of constant travel, and now the thought of staying in one place feels like the greatest adventure I could imagine." David set down a single camera bag, dramatically less equipment than his previous visits had required. "How does it feel to be sharing your carefully constructed solitude?" "Terrifying and wonderful," Emma admitted, moving into his arms with the natural ease they'd developed over months of growing intimacy. "I've become accustomed to controlling every variable in my environment. Learning to accommodate another person's needs and preferences will require adjustment. Good thing we're both patient people who understand the value of careful observation and gradual adaptation." Emma laughed, recognizing their professional skills applied to personal relationship building. "We do have relevant experience in studying complex systems and managing environmental changes." Their embrace carried the comfort of established love combined with excitement about future possibilities. Over the past year, they'd navigated the challenges of long-distance relationship development, learning to communicate openly about fears, needs, and expectations. "I have something to show you," David said, reaching into his camera bag to retrieve a bound-proof copy of his completed book. Emma opened the cover reverently, finding herself looking at a stunning collection of lighthouse photographs that captured both architectural beauty and functional necessity. David's artistic vision had preserved not just images, but the essence of structures that served essential purposes, while standing as monuments to human persistence against natural forces. "David, this is magnificent. The photographs tell complete stories about preservation and purpose." "Look at the Gull Point section," he suggested, his voice carrying quiet pride. Emma turned to find 4 full-page photographs of their lighthouse: autumn storm, winter ice formations, spring renewal, and summer clarity. Each image captured different atmospheric conditions and lighting, but all conveyed the beacon's steadfast protection of maritime interests. "These are the most beautiful photographs in the entire book," Emma said, meaning it completely. "They're the most meaningful to me. This lighthouse, this place, brought me back to life after I thought healing was impossible." Emma closed the book carefully, understanding the significance of David's artistic achievement while recognizing that his personal transformation meant even more than professional success. "What happens now?" she asked. "Your book will be published, my research continues, we build a life together, but what are your goals beyond settling in one place?" "I'd like to establish a photography studio here, focusing on landscape and architectural work for clients who value artistic documentation rather than just pretty pictures." David's voice carried the enthusiasm Emma had learned to associate with his most meaningful projects. "And I'd like to continue some travel photography, but returning home to you instead of moving constantly to avoid connection." "That sounds like a perfect balance of independence and partnership." "What about your research? Any changes or expansions you'd like to pursue?" Emma considered the question thoughtfully. "I'm interested in expanding public education about coastal ecosystem preservation, maybe developing programs that help people understand the connection between marine health and human welfare. We'll both be working to preserve important things, you through science, me through art. Different methods, shared values," Emma agreed. They spent the evening planning practical details of shared living while acknowledging the emotional significance of choosing permanence after both had experienced devastating loss. Neither took lightly the courage required to risk deep love again, but both understood that healing sometimes demanded exactly that kind of brave vulnerability. "Emma," David said as they prepared for their last night before officially living together, "what we had before shapes who we are, but it doesn't define what we can build now." "Exactly," Emma replied, her voice steady. "This feels like carrying forward the best of what we've learned, not leaving anything behind." "I love you," David said quietly, the words steady and certain. "I love you too," Emma replied, her voice soft but sure. They kissed in the glow of the lighthouse beam that had witnessed the entire progression of their relationship, from professional courtesy through friendship to deep love. The beacon continued its protective rotation, steady and reliable, just as their love had proven to be through seasons of doubt and growth. Tomorrow would begin their shared daily life, two people who had learned that love's greatest courage lay not in avoiding loss, but in choosing connection despite understanding its fragility. They had found in each other not just romantic partnership, but proof that the human heart's capacity for love was not diminished by grief, but made more precious by the knowledge of what loss could teach about what truly mattered. Outside, the autumn ocean reflected their lighthouse beam across waters that would continue to need protection, just as their love would continue to need tending. Careful, patient, and absolutely worth the effort required to make it last.